Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Beyond Seven Figures podcast. So, my guest today, his story starts 50,000 feet above ground. He's a fighter pilot, and from there has inspired so many different global leaders from large companies as big as McDonald's, entrepreneurs around the world, Microsoft, Johnson, you name it, for the most part, pretty much had an impact. He's built a humanitarian business that has done in excess of over $200 million. And he's developing a record setting $42 million high rise hotel. That's pretty cool. And transforming an iconic published business into a digital publishing powerhouse. Just got a whole unique blend of experience and so forth. So I tell you what, without further ado, why don't we go ahead and introduce our guest, the author of On Time, On Target, Christian Boucousis. Boucousis.
Boucousis depends.
Got it. So how about I just call you Boo,
That's my way.
right?
I created a website which is callmeboo.com because I spend so many times telling people when they say, "How do you pronounce your last name?" Well, look, just call me Boo. Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. When you get a call sign that you like so much that you'll keep, even outside of the military, that's pretty cool. I'm sure some people get their call sign and they're going, "Oh, guys,
Yeah.
really?"
It's a little story of resilience, actually. And effectively, the lesson you have with a call sign is everyone starts off with a really nasty call sign, something bad. It's changed a little bit now, but this was pre woke era. And the key is to never push back against a negative or a bad call sign because the way it works is fighter pilots have this philosophy, which is, just be really good at the things you can control and accept the things you can't. So don't try and control things outside of you have an inability to control.
So I want to just start this episode by giving you a hat tip. I want to recognize your service. I know it's been a while since you've been in the service, but the amount of courage and sacrifice that you and your fellow soldiers have to go through, really, I just hat tip, and I thank you for that.
No,
So
I appreciate that. And from veterans alike, often we find it very difficult to respond to that because we're service oriented people, generally speaking. And on the flip side, is for all of us, it's an honor to have the privilege of serving our countries and having the responsibility to defend so much that we take for granted. And I think the world today, we're starting to test that a little bit to the point where some of the things we've taken for granted in terms of our freedom, our safety, and our security are really being challenged at a very deep. So we're hopeful that through these podcasts, through the great work that you do, and through the positive influence out there, we're able to inspire some great leaders to get the world back on track.
what do you think it is about the culture of the military where that part of service has been installed throughout? How
I
has
think
that culture been created in the military?
I think it's created out of necessity, and I think it's also our natural default as humans. We are generally service orientated. What we've done, though, I think, in terms of society, is we've stripped that back. If we look at the rise and fall of empires, we look at businesses. You read books like The Fourth Turning that says every fourth generation destroys what the previous three design, build, and grow. We're in a phase of humanity that, in the big scheme of things, a couple of 100,000 years of evolution. In the last 20, we've digitized and created a platform of information that has never existed in human history. In fact, there's so much information, our brains just cannot process it at all. And we've also built a society model, which is about empowering the individual. And the challenge with empowering the individual, it's not how our primal brains work. We're actually engineered to be a community and work better together. Yeah, 150 people is about what you need for a functional environment, right? And I think what's happened now is with the disintegration of the village and the global village, we're seeing a snapback to people, nationalism, wanting to recapture that sense of village. And there's a very powerful, chemical in our body called oxytocin. It's something that we at Afterburner are leaning into a little bit more now. And when you have oxytocin for a long time and it's taken away, it throws your whole body into chemical imbalance. So when you talk about service, you're either pushing your body to the limit, you're putting challenging problems, and ultimately in a combat environment, you're putting your life on the line. And to do that, you naturally produce this oxytocin. So being in service is good for you because it's like taking drugs. It's just you don't have to take them. Your body looks after. And I think when you look at the well-being movement, when you look at mindfulness, a lot of that is about self-awareness as opposed to community awareness. And unfortunately, I think we're spending so much time navel gazing now and getting in our own getting into our own problem set all the time that you know when I left the Air Force, I was discharged. I had a medical disorder. I had to leave. And that's when I started my first business, which was a humanitarian projects business in Afghanistan. So
Right.
I went through this process of going through a mild form of PTSD, certainly not the PTSD, which is trauma driven, more a chronic, just living in the third world for too long and just getting annoyed at everyone in the first world. But through that process, I learned something pretty powerful. And really it was vulnerability, is really important. And being in service to others is and being selfless and getting out of your own way, almost like looking at yourself as if you're your best friend rather than you stop the narrative, which is, I've worked hard, therefore I deserve this. So every time you're feeling an emotive response and the response starts with I or me, to immediately stop the thought. And the second most powerful thing I learned, because I ended up getting divorced. And through that, I had to go on a journey of forgiveness, right? Not a spiritual journey, just a very cognitive journey. So when you go through that process and you start to become forgiving of everyone, then life becomes very easy. The challenge is for most people who believe success is hard won and success is all about the grind, is often the thing that we lose is the forgiveness. We fail to forgive an employee that makes an honest mistake. We fail to forgive a client that doesn't pay us on time. And we get
Sure.
angry and emotional instead. The very, very long answer to what we value in service.
Well,
But the answer to me is to be in service to anyone or anything is good for you. It's what you're meant to be, your default state as a human.
and so one of the things that I learned is more about survival of the fittest. And I thought about that for a minute because,
Mm.
being a fairly independent individual, I like to give value, but I also look at it like, I'm also independent. Like, how much is community necessary to my own survival? It's when you can add more to the survival of everybody else in the community, then the rest of the community conspires around you to help you survive because your survival helps them survive and helps them get more. And you see this sort of
I mean,
like
you not just that you see
it,
that, don't you? I don't watch it anymore. It's a bit samey, but when Survivor, the TV series came out, I think
yeah.
that was one of the first times that people saw that the strongest didn't always win. In fact, the strongest was often seen as a threat and pushed
Mhm.
out of the tribe. And you
If the
find, look,
strongest
there's
was
some,
more focused on themselves, right?
yeah, correct, correct.
Yeah,
I've
it's
got
wild.
a little story there. There's an Australian Special Forces guy called Mark Wales, and he was on the Australian series of Survivor, and he won. And then he was on the Survivor of Survivors, the Champion of Champions, where all the Survivor winners came on, and he won. But when you see how selfless that guy is in action, and you see how well he provides service to others at the same time, downplaying his strengths, like he's ultimately just incredibly humble. To
Yeah.
me, that is the poster child of military servitude and service to others.
Mhm. But this is a perfect example to everything that you've been talking about, Bo, because the reality is that if America said, you know what, we don't need the rest of the world, we don't need any allies whatsoever, we are going to do this by ourselves and only focus on what's good for us and screw everybody else. What do you think would happen to the survival of America as a unit in this world without
Yeah,
any
I mean,
allies?
it's like a startup business. It's very exciting. You're a unicorn, everything's growth, everything's new, and then you get kind of omnipresent. You're everywhere doing everything. You're like, oh no, we've lost our growth engine now. And all of a sudden, we start to lose our motivation, and you start to get that insular type of look. And I think in any empire in history, once if you looked at an empire in terms of an individual, a complex individual, once a complex individual starts to make everything about them, the people they start to lose their network, they start to lose the intangible support of those around them. And I think throughout humanity, there's ample case studies in history that demonstrate every empire that becomes all about them, whether it's nationalistic, populistic, whatever it is not sustainable. It doesn't
Mhm.
tend to. It doesn't tend to end well. I think it's always dangerous to predict the future, but there is precedent for some of the conversations that are going on now historically, where things go well and things go the other way. So which way it goes is going to be interesting to see.
If you want to get promoted, your best way of getting promoted is actually to make your boss's time worth more. In other words, find out what you need to do to make their life easier, richer, more productive, happier, and so forth. Because when you're continuously looking at how do I make those people more valuable, but also your team, how do you empower the team if you're managing people underneath? That's how you get promoted because you become worth more to the company as a whole. But when you're
Yeah.
sitting there, you're solely focused on just doing your job and screw everybody else, just do your job. I don't care about anything else. That is going to be one of the most difficult ways to get promoted.
It goes back to that same story where you've got really hardworking individuals who always complain that the organization's political and political promotions. And the reality is it's not political, it's human. Like people have to make decisions, and 95% of decisions are made based on perception, not reality. And in your world and all the work you do, that might be amazing work delivering fantastic outcomes. So situationally aware is being aware not of only your value, but the value you offer others. And situationally aware is a great way to think, because what it means is, am I consuming information that helps me make decisions? So am I consuming knowledge and am I imparting wisdom? And wisdom is knowledge that allows someone else to make great decisions. And I've never read books on self-help. I've just done stuff. I've just been busy running businesses. And at the same time, I'd get very bored of it. Once it was working, I'd sell it, I'd leave. So I've never been really great at the sustainable business. But for me, I think what I learned as a fighter pilot is the importance of situational awareness. And it's really positioning every conversation with that question: what does good look like for every person that you come across? And when you understand what good looks like for them, it's very easy to serve them to deliver their outcome. And when, again, it's service. Uh,
Yeah.
but so often, and this is particularly important for, I guess, the field that you're in with helping people rapidly grow their business. And part of the best result I ever had with a company is helping them grow 400% in 1 year. They've been stagnated for 12 years. And in 1 year, just by changing their mindset, they quadrupled in growth. So they went from a social platform to 10 times the reach just through one change in mindset, which is, what does good look like? And I think too often we try and figure it out for ourselves. So again, I think why a lot of veterans are successful entrepreneurs is because they're not afraid to say, I don't understand. They're not afraid to ask for help. They're not afraid to do the hard yards on behalf of someone else. And unfortunately, a lot of these folks end up running the world. And they certainly, but they'll do anything to win, which leaves a trail of destruction. So I think as well, when people say and they see people who crush others to success, unfortunately, that is a model to be successful, to be an asshole.
I always thought I understood the military because I've been fascinated by it. And it's just the discipline, the technology, the strategy, everything just fascinates me. But when I actually got to be part of the conversation and I heard the way that they discussed decisions, it still, yeah, it gives me the chills just talking about it because I could see the way that civilians go about making decisions and the way the military does. Civilians go about making decisions by looking at it unilaterally. They look at what they want and they go, "This is what I want, and here's what I'm gonna go and go after it and get it." And there's no thought process of consequence. There's no thought process of, "Am I making the right decision?" It's,
How many
"Here's what I want.
resources do I need to do this? Yeah.
Yeah, here's what I want. I'm just going to go get it." It's essential that our pros list is as strong as our cons list so that we can look at it from a fact, decision based type of model. Because most decisions, when the stakes are high, are not as easy as, "Hey, I want to go do this. Let's go build a border wall." No. Most decisions, when you really level up and you look at all the pros and the cons, most decisions get to that point where it's like, wow, both are
Yeah.
so strong and so powerful. How much of that part of the decision making process do you think was attributed to your success?
certainly know I came at it a different way because ended up getting enmeshed in the whole process from constructing it to developing it to securing finance at every layer because I was so frustrated with the way that it's basically okay. So I have a theory. There's 7 steps to making a decision. It's called the decision making loop. I believe that we operate in loops of thought, but we act as if thoughts are linear. So we always act as if I've made a decision, there's a consequence. It's very ambiguous as to what that looks like. So it's very hard for the military to execute. So it's bad ending for everyone. So, yeah. So when it comes to leadership, I think what leaders need to understand is really your job is the 51% vote because it's pretty much all you're going to have for most of your decisions. Some decisions are easy. There's a puddle. I'm going to walk around it, not get my feet wet. That's a simple decision. But unfortunately, when there's more than you at stake, it becomes a little bit more challenging. And this is where we start to this is why belief is important, right? So I have this philosophy which is performance is what we believe, not what we do. The high performance model is very action orientated. Now, what we believe, so to scale a business, like talk about taking a $2 million business to a $20 million business, right? That ain't going to happen unless and the team believe it's going to happen. So I have a philosophy. Once an individual takes about $1 million a year out of a business, they lose their mojo because that's a nice life, right? To go beyond that, you're going beyond that for other people, for your legacy, your extended family, your employees. Like there's a reason to go beyond that. So what you learn here's what you learn in the military is it's important to have a big objective. Okay, that's very clear. Then we have another layer called the commander's intent, because what we understand implicitly is just because it's written down, if you write something down as a mission and you give it to 10 people, you're going to have 10 different interpretations. So you've got to have this human layer. We don't go, here's the strategy, here's the CEO's intent. We just have strategy. We send it out in an email. And most people in the organization go, EB doesn't mean anything to me. And I don't really care what the revenue is. All I want is a nice new forklift to move the boxes around. And my forklift's falling apart. When we create a strategy that requires 500,000 people to be involved, 500,000 people need to understand what it means to them. And they have to believe what they do at an individual lines up. And you know what? I bet as a civilian on that program with zero military experience, I bet you everyone on that course embraced you and was friendly and let you into the tent and always asked for your opinion, right? That
Yeah.
unlike business, where if you're new into a business, you're new to a business, they hold you out, they shut you down, they don't want that input because you know what? We value everyone's opinion because we know that in every battle, and every one of those requires a different leadership mindset. Leading people is very paternal, it's caring, it's empathetic. Leading the outcome is more logic based. It's about having a tangible objective with a measurable. So it's the science of execution. And leading the moment is the adaptive phase of leadership where our plan and our execution doesn't go to plan. Someone in our team realizes it, but they don't feel comfortable taking over in that moment. And that is it's a fighter pilot model, but it doesn't happen by osmosis or accident. It's formalized. So we always know who's in charge, and our leaders have the humility to let go and let the leader of the moment get everything back on track before we hand it back over to the leader of the outcome. So all these little
Sure.
nuances that you would have experienced there are all forged through lives lost, right?
Mm.
Challenge I find as I lean into, what I'm hoping is my life's work around fighter pilot mindset and ways of working. What I find is it's very hard. You can find certain cognitive models and neuroscience to support it, but there's very little research around human performance where someone dies on the research program at scale
Yeah.
to work out what works and what doesn't. And that's the value that you have by bringing veterans into your organization. The challenge is the insecurity, the lack of courage that tends to pervade a lot of businesses through poor leadership. You never unlock that because it's perceived as being too threatening. So
One thing that
that's
you
a
said.
generalization. Clearly, lots of organizations do understand the value and they're great. So I guess what I should be saying is just be aware of that. Be aware of your insecurities, getting in the way of people who are really good at understanding when to lead people, when to lead the moment, and when to lead the outcome. And they're also empowered to tell a leader when they're not doing that. And that is
Sure.
really challenging for the average business owner.
So, right before we get to the final question of the episode, I just want to comment on one thing where you mentioned about the different levels of leadership and everybody has a role, and you never really know who's got the answer between, all the different levels of rank, so to speak. And it was interesting because the five-star general of Northcom, he was one of the speakers at this event. And he was talking about this war in Afghanistan, this micro war inside of the bigger war that they just kept losing. And he said, that guy had all the answers. We're sitting there in the Pentagon trying to figure this out, strategizing over and over and over again. We keep going to battle, we keep losing. Yet, boots on the ground, lowest ranked officer is the one that had. So now, this is the Beyond Seven Figures podcast. When we look at the CEOs that are looking to go beyond seven figures, what would you say your biggest, best tip is for those CEOs?
First of all is, and I coach some small, medium business CEOs that run companies in the 10 to 50 million category, and they want to grow. But at the same time, they don't want to give up the boat. They don't want to give up their expense accounts. They want their identity so intertwined with the lifestyle that comes with being a mid-tier business owner. I think you've got to look at. I mean, there's obviously three phases of a business: the startup where it doesn't exist, the growth from a startup to where you maybe could step out of the business and someone can run it for you, so it's more flexible, and then the third phase where it's big enough to have investors and it's a fully functioning, shareholder driven entity where you're effectively just become a shareholder. And I think within that framework, and having started a lot of new ventures, you've just got to have a baseline. Like, what's your cash flow for you? What
Mhm.
puts a decent roof over your head, puts the kids through school, and you might get one holiday a year, right? And then commit to the contract to do that. So many organizations have expense account leakage. It's something we're dealing with in this new company that I've acquired. It's just the habit of expensing everything because I'll just put it on the business. And it's always the little leaks that add up, the death by a thousand cuts. So I guess that's the pragmatic advice around money. It's curiosity. So when I first started my business, I read a quote somewhere which is, run your business as if you're going to go out of business tomorrow, and you'll always make good decisions. And I think that the speed of the market now, the speed of disruption, you've got to create a culture that allows the troop in the field that can see the mountain with the holes in it get the information to the five-star general as quickly as possible. So the people leadership has to stop, and we move into outcome leadership. And outcome leadership is a very flat structure. If we are the CEO or the new hire, what we're really doing there is analyzing day-to-day performance against our key metrics. And it's a very scientific measure. Objectives have measurable outcomes, and our results are measurable today. And that creates what we at
Yeah.
Afterburner call the execution gap. Too often, organizations get stressed about targets. If you remove emotion from targets and results and invest in the gap between the two, that's where curiosity is unlocked. And that's where we try and understand why. Why is there a gap between what I want and where I am? But as a fighter pilot, we also end with why and say, why? Well, that's why we're doing it. Why aren't we there yet? And then from there, we come up with an action, not a big action like, hey, this year we need to do this, or we better set up a committee, or we need to go and do some more research. It's a tangible action. It's like, I'm going to do this afternoon or tomorrow. It's that small. It's something that can be done by you. And if we do that as an organization and we have 10 people in a meeting, we have 10 actions, maybe we commit to 20 actions every day. You have 20 contextualized actions based on your current situation. So full situational awareness executed, that is
Hmm.
how you drive exponential growth. And we codified that into the Orca method. And the Orca is to help you remember it. Orca's a killer whale. Killer whale is one of the most intelligent mammals in the animal kingdom. And debriefing is the most intelligent practice you'll bring to an organization. So the circle just keeps going around and around. So it's an endless loop. And that is decision making. Decision making is a loop. That every decision you make it's never going to be your last decision. And the decisions you make are based on what you believe primarily. So if you believe you're scared of jumping out of an airplane in a parachute, you're not going to jump out of it. If
Sure.
someone can adjust
Got it.
that belief by gradually getting you to the point where you are completely comfortable now, so expanding your comfort zone, then you're going to do it. So
Yeah.
it requires learning, and it requires taking people who have no idea of something to a full idea. And the only way you can do that is through debriefing. That's the only way you can do it quickly with the minimum number of mistakes and errors to get the results that you want.
Awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. I think that's a perfect way to summarize and wrap up today's episode. Now, people want to learn more about you and your book. Where do we send them?
Callmeboo.com, easy for the website, or afterburner.com is for our enterprise wide programs. We work with over 3,500 companies over 25 years. I don't think there's anything we haven't seen in strategy to execution from Nike, all the way down to Deloitte, the Deloitte Academy, Harvard. We've really niched into what it takes to execute flawlessly at an enterprise level.
Awesome. So it's afterburner.com. What a great domain, by the way. And call me Boo. So awesome. Well, hey, that wraps up today's episode of the Beyond Seven Figures podcast. For additional strategies, tips, and information for taking your company beyond seven figures, also check us out at predictableprofits.com. Again, that's predictableprofits.com. This is Charles Godet with my new friend, Boo. Don't
Thank
forget,
you,
call me
Charles.
Boo.
It was a wonderful podcast, man. Really appreciate it.
This has been great. Thank you so much.